Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laser Focus. This is the deep dive pop culture podcast from Nerdist. I'm Kyle Anderson. Thank you so much for listening and indeed watching. Those of you who are watching on our YouTube, a new thing we're trying out with these Andor episodes. Hopefully you enjoyed the first two. This one we got in studio because the person who I'm talking with this week is literally 2 offices down from me. So why would we do it over Zoom?
Like a hologram right now.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome to the show. Back to the show, of course. Nerdist's own Dan Casey. Hey, bud, how are you?
Hey, Kyle. I'm great. I'm super stoked to be here. I love this show.
Yeah.
I think for my money, best Star Wars in the modern era. Strong rival or contender for maybe best Star Wars in my estimation, period.
Yeah.
Very excited to talk about these episodes in particular.
Yes.
They're a lot.
They're a lot, yeah. So we are talking about episodes 7, 8, and 9, week 3 of Andor Season 2. Please, if these are going to be very spoiler-heavy episodes, as always, so make sure you've watched them or you don't care about spoilers. We have friends everywhere, but we don't have friends who complain about stuff.
No, so usually no friends in the comment section, unless you're polite, in which case, thank you.
Thank you so much, yeah.
We appreciate it.
Very much appreciate it. Before we get into 7, 8, and 9, of course, I do want to just touch in on what you thought of the first 2 arcs of this season so far.
Yeah, so I think the first 2 arcs were both really strong. I think the first arc, not the weakest, but I mean, it's a lot of table setting.
Very much so.
We really catch up with Cassian after a certain amount of time has passed since the tragedy on Ferrix. And you can see how that's hardened him and sharpened him. But I love seeing the sort of tensions that are developing between Cassian and Luthen. You also really get this fascinating look at Bix and everything that she's been through.
Absolutely.
And just a really interesting look at how they're setting the stage for Gorman. This whole series, and we'll talk about this more, is just really a case study in sort of like the 5 stages of fascism, Robert Paxton's 5 stages of fascism.
Yeah.
And just the sort of the horrific scene that they're painting, the situation that they are setting up on Gorman, the pockets of fascism they're fomenting will start fulminating and bubbling over.
Yeah.
And this arc in particular, but for the first 6, 7 episodes of the season, first 6 episodes of the season, I've been loving it. It's been a real treat to get what's effectively like a 3-hour movie each week, even though I know it's a lot to consume. But for me, it's just they all play so well. They play like little mini series within the context of a larger show.
Yeah, I think what really works for me, because I talked about with Ro, the first arc, like the standout there is the Mon Mothma wedding stuff. That's easily like the most interesting.
Oh my god, yeah, the dance sequence, which just interspersed with everything else that's happening, is just like so brutal.
It's really great, and it kind of reminds you that like these are just real people who have their own, there's so much going on in that's basically like a little play, which I really
and then the little subplot with the gaggle of erstwhile rebels on Cassian, where Cassian was supposed to make the drop with Porco. Yeah. A fantastic name.
I hope it's after Porco Rosso.
It should be. I
hope that was the goal.
Either that or a prelude to Jack Tono Porkins. R.I.P. King.
R.I.P. So yeah, he's related to Porco. He's the Porkin.
Yes, he is the next of Porkin.
The next of Porkin. But what I really liked about that, to your point about Cassian being hardened and stuff, is that we also, and especially true in these episodes, is that he's a pro now. Like, it's been long enough that he is like, and he's been under Luthen for such a long time, and it's starting to wear on him. But he knows what he's doing, and it's very clear that like, for the rebellion to like work, there needs to be some sort of focal like alliance, as it were, like an actual like functioning body. It can't just be clandestine stuff and terrorism activities and things like that. Of course.
I mean, that's at the heart of Dead Ramiro's plan on Gorman. You need this rebel group that's going to be sort of unstable and willing to take unnecessary risks, because if all of these sort of independent splinter cells realize that they don't have to be independent, they can work together, that's when the Empire's in danger. That's when the Rebel Alliance forms. Spoiler alert for Star Wars.
Yeah.
Things don't go so well for old Palpy Boy.
Yeah. he may or may not fall into a thing.
Yeah, dude can't stop I mean, Star Wars is just a series of people falling into seemingly endless chasms, only for them to return later pretty much unharmed.
Yeah. Arc 2, which was last week, I talked about with Eric, and I think especially in context of these 3 episodes, I think they were incredibly important to set up who the Gorman people are.
Yes.
And the plight, because the massacre, which we end up seeing in episode 8, incredibly, which we'll obviously get to, wouldn't hit as hard had we not spent so much time on Gorman with just people and the grassroots elements.
No, you have to. They did a very smart thing of really humanizing these people, giving you something they've done this season, which I thought was very effective. They did it with the wedding sequence on Chandrilla as well. Is you really get a sense of local customs in a way that's not played for laughs, kind of like it was during the wedding sequence on The Mandalorian with Jack Black and Lizzo.
Right.
Which is great. Like, you know, I will say there is still plenty of humor in Andor.
100%.
But you really see how these customs interact, how they chafe against sort of this encroaching fist of the Empire, and nowhere is that more firmly felt than Gore. Because, you have to see these people, their culture, get a sense of, like, what a beautiful place it is, you know, even prior to being under the, like, very firm boot heel of the Empire. And you just see that encroaching further and further as the series goes on. But, it's really interesting. It feels like, and we'll get into this a bit more, it feels like they're almost being set up as sort of this analog for, you know, like the French resistance.
100%.
Against,
Space France.
Space France. The French resistance under, like, the Vichy France collaborationist regime, you know, who kowtowed to Hitler and the Nazis. It's just, it feels very much like that is the intentionality here.
Yes, and they did a really good job, I think, and they always do, because every episode is so dense with material. The previously on segments I find really enlightening, because it's like, here's what you really need to focus on.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they did before episode 7 was that in episode 1, there's that initial meeting between Krennic and all the Imperials, and there's the different, you know, there's the 2 guys who basically are like...
the Ministry of Information, or was it?
Yeah.
Those guys were great because of how slimy they were. Just A+ performances as the worst people you've ever met.
Absolutely. And I love that they're basically like... The Gorman people, they're too, snooty, right?
Haven't they always put themselves above everyone else, these spider-loving freakazoids?
Yeah.
Sorry, Gorlectopods.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah. But I think that's really important, because by the time the episode actually begins, episode 7, they have seeded so much galactic doubt in their kind of, like, they are pushing against the Empire, and there's so much news that we see. The opening scene when Cyril Karn is, like, walking to work, basically, and we just see all those news outlets being like, yet another unprovoked terrorist attack against the Empire and all this stuff.
These dastardly Gore have done it once again.
Yeah.
One other detail I love is how these episodes have been starting when you see the Andor logo. And then they've done a great job. You know, we hear that sound increasingly loudly over the course of a couple episodes of the hammer from Ferrix,
right?
That they use to signal that, like, they were under attack, and it gets increasingly loud as we get closer to open rebellion here on Gore.
Yeah,
on Gorman. The Gore are the people. The
Gore,
Gorman. It's ironic because the man are the Gore, but Gorman is the planet.
Yeah. I really, really like all of those actors. I wish it was... The one thing I will say about the show is that there's so many characters that I don't know who they are. I don't know the character names because they have not, as we record this, updated the IMDb with the character names yet.
Yeah,
so
you can get... If you watch with subtitles, you can see some of them. But even then, you know, you might not know until probably spending a couple hours with them. And you're like, oh, I guess your name is Sam with 2 M's.
Yeah. But there are so many of those great Gorman Resistance, the Gorman Front, actors. The one that stands out to me is the kind of elder statesman,
Rylance,
who is so good, played by Richard Semel, who's been in a million things, usually playing a bad guy, but here he's playing, I think, a really sympathetic character.
Yeah, it's such a complicated role because he's kind of this, like, businessman, elder statesman who is trying to stand up for his people, but, like, they're clearly way in over their head, being manipulated from every side, both by, you know, the ISB through Cyril, and also by Luthen, who's just, like, leveraging them to wage his war against the Empire, because he didn't, like, you know, you gotta break a few eggs to make a revolutionary omelet in his eyes.
Yeah, and I like in episode 7. I do want to spend a fair amount of time with episode 7 because that is, while it's not as flashy, I think there's a lot of really interesting things here. And one of the things you mentioned, Luthen, of course, is that the newly formed Rebel Alliance, which is now on Yavin 4, they, you know, it's people who used to like work for the Empire who have defected.
Yes.
Who are, we have General Draven is the focal point here in this episode, but basically like they're the military. They are, we will get senators eventually like involved. These people who are like statesmen, and Luthen is he's the match basically, but he does not play ball with them. He's sort of like an antithesis or kind of the opposite side of the coin of Saw Gerrera, who is just we're just gonna blow him up.
No, of course. To your point. It's like we're seeing how this nascent rebellion is gaining traction. We're seeing that it cannot just be these disparate militias, each with their own goal. But then it is still a spectrum because you can't control what other people are going to do when faced with impossible circumstances. Luthen will always be an operative who works in the shadows. He's still the one they rely on his network for all of their wet work, all of their black ops operations.
Yeah.
With Saw, you can't tell Saw. You can tell Saw what to do, but he's not going to do it.
Right.
He's just going to do his own thing and just huff jet fuel with will to radicalize that poor man.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to see, especially as they try to instill this sense of discipline and how, like Cassian, for example, really chafes under that because he's been so used to operating on his own roughly, or at least only answering to Luthen as this sort of, real splinter cell of, they're working for the greater good, but the greater good was kind of this nebulous force previously.
Yeah, and there's an element of losing freedom that this episode really plays with, which is like Cassian just is ignoring all of the kind of... I think he understands that he doesn't really want to do this anymore, but like he is really good at it. And also like obviously at the end of episode 9, we have the where Bix leaves, which is... she's basically like the alliance or the rebels need you more than you need me.
It's you see all of these like really fascinating arcs with our trio of characters who survived the assault on Ferrix.
Right.
With Will, we see this sort of like young idealistic kid get sort of beaten down and hardened and exposed to all of these really radical people. And it turns him into someone who is just extremely dedicated to the capital C cause at the expense of his own well-being, as we see by the end of these 3 episodes. With Bix, she's someone who had really awful PTSD, starting to heal because, she fortunately was able to quite literally purge her biggest demon when they blew up Dr. Gorst's lab, which was a killer sequence.
That was so good, yeah.
So well done. But she's, not to say that she's healed, but she was able to... She seems like she's in a better place.
She's
from
not
where we found her in
by...
the first 7 episodes of the season, where she was, starting to abuse drugs to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Cassian, on the other hand, is sort of like regressed, where he doesn't want to do anything to jeopardize his like sense of domestic bliss or his little sense of freedom that he has, like really taking umbrage at anything Luthen wants him to do, anything the rebellion wants him to do, and just sort of running away from this idea that he is a leader, which is something we hear Vel call him later on in the episode. I think this one, or episode 8 maybe, whenever she's talking to Bix.
Like he still doesn't trust anybody. Like when they go and Bix tries to introduce him to the woman who
the Force Healer?
The Force Healer, which I think is really cool.
It's a great sequence because it's like, it does feel like it could be mumbo jumbo or just like, like, oh, cool. What's this homeopathic nonsense you're trying to shill me? Like, all right, let's see, we got some Yoda oil.
and he's just like, don't tell them anything about me. They don't need to know anything. And like, he's just like, she's just a cook and like all this stuff. And Bix is sort of like, well, you're not just a pilot. Like there's more to everybody. And like, he just really does not want to even listen to that. Like, which I think is an interesting thing about him. Like, he has been so kind of conditioned over his adult or, life to either just be a criminal doing little bits, or either way, he's in the shadows.
He's a survivor.
He's a survivor.
He does whatever he needs to do to survive with his people, oftentimes outside the bounds of the law. And I think it's interesting as well because this to me, what really stands out about Andor is that it's not a show about the Force. It's not a show about the Jedi.
Right.
But in the world of Star Wars, in the Star Wars universe, the Force is this gigantic thing that encompasses the entire galaxy. It binds everyone. But You have to open yourself up to the Force. It flows through us, but you still have to open yourself up to it. Cassian is someone who's closed off to that.
Very much
He's
so.
someone who cannot let anything in at this point because he's so afraid of being hurt or losing or having it taken away. So when he's confronted with this woman who is presumably connected to the Force, I'm willing to accept that she is Force sensitive, or maybe can perform a modicum of Force healing. Like, it seems like everyone surviving Order 66.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to see that dichotomy there, because, not saying he needs to embrace the Force, but opening himself up to what the universe is giving him, the role it's putting him into, instead of closing himself off and chafing against it, I think is one of the big struggles he faces in this arc in particular.
Absolutely. And I think it sort of represents, it's an easy way to, not easy, but it's a way to represent how he doesn't really care about community anymore. It's literally just Bix. That's like, he's even mad at Willman for even continuing to work with Luthen, because he's just like, he knows what Luthen's about.
Will's also being super evasive at the beginning of episode 7. But he does show up for Will when it counts. Like, he
truly,
he does go, he is always trying to look after Will.
Yeah.
I just, the thing that kills me is that I hope at some point he goes back for B2, because poor B2 is stuck on, was it Mina Rao? Mina Cow? Mina Tao?
Rao, I believe.
I forget. So I've written so many notes, and I was writing notes for the entire season, and halfway through I realized I've been writing Clea's name wrong. I've been writing Clyra. Jesus Christ. Anyway.
Yeah. Clea, excellent.
Fantastic.
By the way. She's tremendous.
Yes, she is really good. Something else I want to mention in the context of this episode in particular is a detail. It's one of those like blink and you'll miss it things, or like close your ears and you'll miss it. When Partagaz is talking to Dedra about like, hey, I need you to declare martial law in 48 hours. The Emperor needs the planet now. He mentions that Krennic is working in a lab on Iadu, I think is how they pronounced it. And that is the lab where Galen Erso was working to process kyber crystals for the nascent Death Star project.
Yes.
So it's nice to get these little bits and bobs of connective tissue, especially because we know where things are going with Rogue One. And we've seen, like what they were doing on Narkina 5, the whole galaxy is effectively working on this large Death Star project. It's very fascinating to hear how their plans are being executed across the galaxy. Hey, don't worry, we're still working on this, but we still need you to do a little genocide as a treat to get us the deep substrate calcite that our bodies crave here on Gorman.
Obviously there's lots going on in these episodes, but I was really struck by how evil the Empire is with regard to Gorman. They have been seeding this for years.
Oh, for sure.
And they just go, we just need, and this was Dedra's whole idea, is like, we just need them to be a little bit angry at us so that we can justify wiping them entirely out.
Exactly.
It's very of the time, and I don't think that it seems like it is a coincidence or not a coincidence, but I think it was a coincidence. I don't want to say what's going on in the real world that this feels very like.
You can draw a lot of real world analogs to a bunch of things in here, including if you look at the show through the lens of the 5 stages of fascism.
Yes,
which I urge you all to check out if you're not familiar with Robert Paxton's seminal work.
Yeah. The Imperial troops that show up.
Yes.
They and I forget his name, but
Kaido?
Kaido, yes.
Yeah, the Imperial Crisis Specialist?
Yes, who specifically brought people who were young and untrained so that it would be an absolute mess.
Yes. Oh, it's terrifying.
It's incredibly terrifying. And, we saw a little bit in episode 6 when Cinta gets killed, is that there's one blaster bolt shot.
Yeah.
And that was enough to call everybody, like, it's it. That's all they needed was one, and it was errant. It was friendly fire.
Exactly.
And that is just how quickly they've moved in, and we see all the propaganda. But like the fact that these people and the sergeant at arms is like, these guys are not ready.
Yeah,
and
it's
he's
like,
just
go
do
constantly
it anyway.
getting reprimanded. Like, you go out there and you start a riot, damn it.
Yeah.
Or let us start one using you as bait.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's real brutal. I will say some details I love about this episode. Just to lighten things up a bit, the funniest single joke on the show so far has happened in this episode, and they bring it back in episode 9. which is where Cassian, I thought Varian Sky fashion designer was a great sort of like cover for Cassian, but here, Ronnie Goo. Ronnie Gooja. They just keep calling him Ronnie Goo, Midrim News.
It's and then nobody can pronounce it right. He's like
Gooja. Yeah, it's good because it's like a weird name. No one's really heard of him. No one's heard of his outlet, but they're like, sure, like if you're here to cover it, I don't really care.
Yeah. And then I love that we see the hotel worker who does recognize him but doesn't drop the dime at all. It's great. Yeah. It's really good. Because he knows what's going on. He knows the score.
Ball.
He knows it. He knows it. I will confess, I rewatched episode 7 because episode 8 and 9 were so seared into my brain
for sure.
that I wanted to make sure that I remembered a bunch of stuff. And I think having seen the later 2 episodes really made me appreciate this one, the episode 7, all the more. Because it's all set up. And we do get to see Cyril and Dedra. Like, Dedra knows what's going on, obviously.
Yeah.
And has been instructed many times not to tell Cyril what's going on. And he is getting more...
he's getting super emotional.
Yeah.
He's
just like, what are we doing
reckless here? Yeah, I think that, what are we doing here? Following orders. Like, that line right there, I think, speaks volumes.
Yeah.
And, also, Partagas's line to Dedra... Just do... That's not the line. Let the image of professional ascendant settle your nerves, which I wrote, just do this genocide and you'll get promoted.
Yeah, and that's what she says. She's like, we're going to go back to Coruscant.
We're going to get rewarded.
We're going to get rewarded. And he's like, well, I've been trying to fight... He knows. Mm-hmm. This is the most interesting thing about Cyril, is that he's a little twerp, obviously.
Yes.
And he's on the wrong side. He is 100% on the wrong side. But this season especially does a really good job of making it like he wants to be on the right side. And he thinks he is on the right side.
He's someone who believes very firmly in the rule of law.
100%.
He believes in following the rules, in doing what in his mind is the right thing, because this is the government and ruling body he supports. And I think when he sees the lengths and skullduggery and just like horrific things they're willing to do, it just chafes his underlying code.
Yeah.
In a way that it just short circuits him entirely, and it one shots him. It's
and the fact that like he even tries to beseech Rylance's daughter, like just give me some outside influence and we
can make all this stop. It's fine. Like, we're definitely not going to frack your planet into dust.
Yeah. He's so naive. That's kind of like the tragedy of Cyril Karn, is that like he is naive and whipped, unfortunately, like by the government, by his job, and of course by Dedra. Like he's absolutely over his head.
All of this culminates in episode 8, which I think for many people will be perhaps the most resonant episode of the series so far.
It's incredible. It's up there with whatever the last episode was of last season.
Yeah, it's just spectacular storytelling, incredibly tightly plotted. And for my money, this might be the most horrific thing we've seen in Star Wars, because it really shows the granularity of the Empire's brutality. It's removed from the confines of intergalactic space war. It's removed from it's less abstracted than seeing a super laser destroy a planet. Yes, the Death Star kills billions of people in a second, but that is harder for the human brain to wrap itself around. Seeing this, which, you can draw so many analogs to, real world gun violence, like revolution, just all of this. It feels very of the moment in a way that, in both like timeless in a way that is deeply and viscerally uncomfortable when you see people being killed at point blank range, when you see just the absolute chaos unfolding. It's so well done while still managing to tell this very tightly plotted story. But I think the way it showcases just the viciousness of the Empire is something that I don't feel like we've really seen as effectively. Like, yes, Order 66, but that I think is also even still abstracted through like the lens of, we have the good space wizards, and we have the evil space wizard who's attacking them with his like army of like brainwashed super soldiers.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's just, these are just normal people. No one here has a lightsaber. Most of them don't have any weapons at all. And to have it happen on the site of where, a couple decades prior, was it like 50 years or something, maybe less?
I think it was less, yeah.
They landed a Star Cruiser on top of 500 people in the middle of that square makes it very resonant.
Yeah, and I love the little name drops to, Tarkin was the one who did that and things like that. We know these characters by name, and so that, I think, adds a lot of, gravitas to those actions.
Yeah.
So episode 8 is basically just an extended riot sequence, which is so harrowing, as you said. But what I really love is the tension building. They do such a good job. Both this, I want to quickly shout out. So these episodes were written by
Dan Gilroy.
Dan Gilroy, Tony's brother, and were directed by
Janos Metz.
Janos Metz, who is a killer, just absolutely owns these 3 episodes. The ratcheting up of tension of the Gore people singing their national anthem essentially, over and over and over again, and it's just how, and it's just it makes what's about to happen all the more tragic because they love their country or their planet, they love their everything about them, and they realize that they are under threat of losing it all.
Yeah.
And the fact that the shot that starts it is a sniper, an Imperial sniper killing one of its own.
Yes, to make it feel as though the crowd has turned on the soldiers.
Yeah.
And then that coupled with the order for all the exits to be sealed, you have all of these people sort of penned in this kill box, basically.
Yeah.
It's really upsetting. It feels like the way they frame it all with all the pillars and the columns, people hiding behind them, debris flying, explosions. It is a really just brutal sequence of events that unfolds.
It's one of those weird things about war movies in general, especially really kind of realistic quote unquote war movies, is that it's incredible to watch, and yet you are appalled the entire time at just how bad it gets. And it's weird. Both this and episode 9, we know these characters, Cassian and Mon Mothma, we know they get out.
Yeah.
And yet I'm still just
I'm still on the edge of my seat. I'm it feels like something bad could happen at any second. Yeah. I know they have to live to fight another day, but that's when you're in it, you're in it.
You're absolutely, And I love that Cassian is sort of a fly on the wall for a little bit of this. And he is just there. I do love the fact that he and Willman go specifically to kill Dedra because they're she's after Luthen. We just have
She's after Luthen. She was responsible for Ferrix, and we gotta take her out.
Yeah.
And having no idea that this bigger thing is happening.
Yeah.
And just being dropped into that. And then also just the tension that we see between Dedra and Cyril come to a head where he chokes her out in her office and just it's a horrifying sequence where he's just cannot control his impulses when he realizes that the Empire is basically ordering a genocide.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, you wanted to be together. You were fine with all the promotions. Why is this a problem now?
Yeah.
It's really harrowing stuff. I mean, their relationship, one of the creepiest things about this series overall. I mean, he's basically her stalker in season 1, and now he's the one that has the moral high ground, so to speak.
Yeah.
Not that choking your partner puts you on any sort of moral high ground, but I guess I don't even want to argue this. It's not.
Yeah, I don't know.
He's comparing apples and genocide here.
Yeah.
But it's they're all bad.
They're
bad people doing bad things, but some are doing slightly more bad things. I also loved the line about Kaido. Let's not confuse the chain of command here, counselor or supervisor. I'm the trigger supervisor. You're the finger.
Yeah.
I've set up everything. You still have to give the order, Dedra Meero, to initiate this nightmarish sequence of events.
Yeah, it's still on you.
Yes. You will still be the one that has the blood of the Gore on your hands.
Yeah. Maybe it is getting to her. We don't know.
It definitely is. I mean, she has a panic attack.
That's true.
At the end of the episode. You can see her getting constantly ruffled, and Partagas is you're being a bit emotional.
Yeah.
It's she is having a full-blown panic attack at the end of the episode, clutching at her neck where Cyril was grabbing at her, just constantly readjusting her shirt. It's definitely not something she did lightly, but she still did it and seemed like she didn't hesitate too long. I mean, that 10 seconds of pause, more than many of the other people there may have paused, but even so, she still said, yes, do it.
Yeah. Oh man, and that's just like another step of fascism is getting people to put like, well, I'm doing this for a purpose and it's for the greater good, and they're also going to yell at me or kill me if I don't do it. Like, I'm just following orders.
Yeah,
it's
I'm just doing my job.
Yeah, I mean, the Nuremberg defense, like all that stuff. It was I was just there. I was just doing, and like that's Kaido's like. He's like, I just have the supplies, basically.
But here's the thing. I don't think that Kaido is, I don't think that he is sort of excusing himself from any responsibility. He's like, I know what I'm doing and I'm owning it. You need to as well.
Yeah.
I can't be the one to give the order because I respect chain of command. And you better do this as well.
Yeah.
Because, like, he knows what he's like the guy they bring in to set up your like genocide dominoes.
Yeah.
And then she's like, okay, you have to push it over legally.
Yeah.
One thing that I loved about this episode was the fight between Cyril and Cassian.
100%.
That was one of the most brutal fights of the series. It's such a like knockdown, drag out, like barroom brawl with he's just this impotent rage finally on someone he's been obsessed with that he can take it out on.
Yeah.
And then you just see him get absolutely stun-locked when Cassian's like, who are you?
Yeah.
And it doesn't compute that he would have no idea who Cyril is. When Cyril has been obsessively hunting this man for, at this point, 5 years?
Yeah.
Maybe more? It's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's that, and then Rylance being the one to shoot Cyril in the head feels like a nice little poetic justice for, it's not going to save your planet, but at least you can take out the guy who betrayed you.
Yeah, it makes so much more sense. It's a thematically resonant, like, because if Cassian had done it, he doesn't know who this guy is. It's ironic, I guess, for Cyril to be killed by Cassian, but it wouldn't serve Cassian at all. It doesn't matter to him.
Exactly. He's just another obstacle.
Yeah.
That's Cassian at this point. It's, as we see in the next episode as well, if there's an obstacle in your way, you take them out because you have a bigger objective here.
But Rylance doing it, I think, is like, and we know we don't see Rylance get killed, but we assume it's minutes away.
It's heavily implied that he gets killed. I mean, especially with the devastation that takes place in that square. When they released the security droids, it is upsetting.
It's really
seeing
upsetting.
The first one just kick that gigantic barricade like it's a soccer ball, and when he throws, I believe he throws Rylance's daughter, and she just ragdolls across the pavement.
Yeah, he basically cracks her neck.
Yeah, it's so upsetting.
It's really bad.
So upsetting. And I will say, when we first go in there and Cyril goes into that holding room and the one looks at him, I'm like, you better be K2SO. You better be K2SO because I need to hear Alan Tudyk's sweet dulcet tones.
Yes.
And, not a spoiler. We're talking about spoilers. We do get him eventually, but I love that thought where he's like, I'm going to take you with me. I miss B2, so I need a new guy.
I need a droid who's going to make fun of me.
Exactly.
Like Riley.
Keep me honest.
Yeah. Everybody needs that. I love Cyril, that whole fight with, because he's just walking through the devastation. He's just like, I can't believe I am in any way party to this. But also he's like, this was I don't know if he just thinks this is awful. I don't get the sense that Cyril wanted this to happen or even condones any of it. But he understands that, like, this is happening now and I don't know what I should do now. And then, he sees Cassian and just goes, there's my guy. I'm going to absolutely beat the shit of him.
I think in Cyril's eyes, he probably anticipated that they would just, like, make a mass arrest of the Gorman front, or once they found out their outside influence, they would arrest them and entrap them. And, it would just be like a clean sting operation. Yeah. I don't think he ever thought it would escalate to, martial law, mass military occupation, plans for forced resettlement, or just complete genocide of the Gore people. Yeah. That's why he's clutching at straws in episode 7 and 8 because it doesn't compute to him. No. He's doing what he was told, and what he was told was a lie, and he was lied to by one of the people he trusts most, the only person who was able to stand up to his mother and give him a sense of purpose. Yeah. And I think that really messes with him. Like when Dedra plants one on him in episode 7, it feels very manipulative.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like this is a loving relationship.
But it's in public and the lights are on.
Yeah, I'm like, what do you mean we can have a little PDA? It's crazy. And then like the line that Ryland says to Cyril in episode 7, where he's just like, what kind of being are you? He's like, what is it you've been sent to steal from us? What kind of being are you? How do you say that? How do you speak these words? You've destroyed us.
Yeah.
And I don't think he can reconcile that.
No.
And the only thing that he can, like, that speaks to the lizard part of his brain is when he sees the guy he's been hunting for so long.
And
it's like,
yeah.
I knew I was right.
Yeah.
I knew there were outside forces.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy. They were. I can do my job. I can
Yeah.
still be mommy's good boy.
Yeah. Oh man, it is really brutal, and Cassian gets, which is weird. You wouldn't expect Cyril to be like, I mean, he's not a good fighter. It's not like he has form, but
he gets the drop on.
He gets
That's
the
thing.
drop.
It's like Cassian is looking down the scope, and Cyril just gets the drop on him, and like he has the advantage. So because he's also just his adrenaline is so up, he's just seeing red.
Yeah.
But he's clearly not a good fighter. And it's just the circumstances of everything around them. I think if they were to face off squarely, Cassian would drop him very handily.
Absolutely. Yeah, I that whole sequence was great. And then that's not the end of the episode.
No. It keeps going. It keeps going.
It keeps going. They have to try to escape.
While Will stays behind with his partner, Drina, to send out the news that the Imperial murder of the Gorman has begun.
Yeah. Which is incredibly important as that sets up the next episode.
Yes.
I do love that there is some level of like, when Rylance, they look at each other, he goes, you kind of didn't give us what we wanted last time, but I know you and I understand.
Yeah.
But we get the sense in, when Vel is talking to Bix a little bit that, that whole thing from the previous episode, like, that went to shit, and Vel is like, I don't want to do that kind of thing anymore.
Yeah. I mean, she sees the cost of what happens if things go wrong, and she's like, I started getting reckless. Like, I can't do that anymore. And then she understands it's not everyone's cut out for it.
Yeah.
But she knows that Cassian is, but he needs to be a leader. He can't just be this rogue agent, like acting of his own free will, acting just out of his own self-interest.
Yeah.
And we see that come to a head in the next episode, which, again, to go from the massacre on Gore to the tensest, like extraction mission at the Senate, as Mon Mothma delivers her speech speaking out against the Emperor, against the massacre of the Gore. It is just, oh my God, it is like, I was clenched the entire time watching that. It was such electric filmmaking.
Yeah.
Really, kudos to the entire team, everyone that's made Andor possible. That episode was just like a live wire, and like, it didn't let the tension off after the previous episode, the massacre of Gorman. It was tense in a different way.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh my God, the walls are closing in. They're bugging senators' offices. Like, you have all of these, like, you see the senator from Gorman being arrested at the beginning while no one lifts a finger or says anything to stop them. And you just really get the sense that, like, the curtains are closing on democracy.
Yeah.
The Senate was always kind of a ruse, like a facade. It was more just like, yeah, we're going to give you the sense that you have a meaningful voice here, but you don't really, and you haven't really ever since Senator Palpatine became Chancellor Palpatine, became Emperor Palpatine.
Yeah. And there's that little line that Tarkin says at the beginning of A New Hope where he's just like, the Imperials are like, well, the Senate, and he's like, the Senate is gone. It's basically, it's over. The last vestiges of the old Republic have gone away, or whatever he says. And this is the beginning of that. This is sort of like, we saw how democracy fell with rousing applause in episode 3. And then at this point, it's like, this is now democracy just being over. Like, if they can commit genocide and have various members of the Senate go, yeah, good for you. Like,
yeah. Oh my God. There's one line in there where I did cackle a little bit just at how overwrought it is, because shout out to Dan Gilroy for this particular line. The tragic broth we sipped this morning has been brewing in plain sight. It was a stew called murder. It's like that sort of overblown, really just like pompous speech, just glazing an atrocity is just it. And just seeing the sheer variety of people from all different walks of life, all of these extraterrestrial beings, like heartily endorsing the wholesale murder of the Gore because, it's just been laundered through all of this state-run media. That's been a really interesting undercurrent this season, as we've mentioned, is sort of just seeing how they've weaponized the media, weaponized the news to use propaganda as a cudgel against the people of Gorman.
Yeah. And that is really something like, again, at the beginning of episode 7, there's nobody in the square except Imperials.
Yes.
And 4 different news outlets all doing the same story.
Yeah.
Like just disseminating it so far out there because they have done such a good job of kind of perpetuating this lie for years now, apparently, at least a year, that Gorman is ready to, rebel and will kill Imperials wantonly and all this stuff. And all of those, that senator who, with the broth of, so that's, what was it again? Say it again.
So the tragic broth we sipped this morning has been brewing in plain sight. The only surprise about yesterday's insurgency was the savagery of the Gorman attack.
And we were there and we saw that there was no such thing.
Yeah, what Gorman attack? There was a Gorman response.
Yeah.
One other detail I love that they've done is always cutting back to Cyril's mom, watching, like just mainlining what is pretty clearly an analog for certain news networks out there.
Lothcat News?
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely like all the punditry you see. And I also like when we got that little glimpse of the morning show that just plays in Coruscant.
I love all of that stuff. This season has television. Like there's actual, it's not just, who knows what, but they legitimately have television.
Yeah, the
networks.
hollows. It's on all the hollows.
It's incredible. I love, and they're just, it's ridiculous, but it's so relatable. I do think that there's a, before we get fully into episode 9, I do think there is a contingency of Star Wars fan who won't care about any of this stuff because it is too heavy. It's really heavy.
Sure.
And it's very, the allegory is strong. If you want to, everybody go read Eric Diaz's review of the season. I think it's incredibly apt, but he calls it closer to Star Trek in terms of its allegory to like what's actually going on, but not in a way that like devalues the Star Wars aspect of it, because it's always been about war and the response to fascism.
Yeah, of course. And this to me is Star Wars at its finest, because it really speaks to this deep struggle between good and evil. I mean, there's no way to defend what the Empire is doing here. It's like, I get it. People want to dress up as stormtroopers because the armor looks cool, but at the same time, like, this is really showing you by putting on that stormtrooper armor, they become it's dehumanizing because they can become faceless. You can abstract atrocity through the uniform because you can't put a face to the crime.
And they do a really good job this season of like, you see a few stormtroopers, but mostly you see these kind of, I guess, specialized security ISB forces who might wear armor, but they don't have helmets, so that you can see each of them. And you know that they are either like frothing at the mouth or they're just kind of like scared and stuff. Like, it does humanize the other side in a really interesting way. It doesn't make them like, we don't like Dedra, and we don't like, Partagaz.
No, but she's a complex character that feels fully realized, who has struggles and wants and desires and challenges that she faces, and it's fascinating to see how she navigates them, because I didn't think we'd go inside the psychology of a rising star in the secret police, who is like given her biggest assignment yet to orchestrate the genocide of a planet. And what toll does that take on you?
Yeah, it's incredible. And also, like, we don't really ever get to see, other than that panic attack scene, which is really good. And I think Denise Goff is, like, incredible.
She has some, like, all-time scowls she does in these 3 episodes. There was one frown where I was like, My goodness.
Yeah.
I've never seen someone so displeased.
Yeah, she's on a new show that's gonna like airs on Freeform or something.
But also?
No, it's called like Lost Girl. But also, you can't do that.
I'm sorry.
What did Rose said? It was Butt and it's like we can't call it Butt End. But anyway, where she's like she plays like a woman who's lost her daughter. It's like a very sad thing, but she doesn't look nearly as like despondent as she does as Dedra. I think it's very funny, but
well, I mean, it's pretty well reflected in her just like state of being. Her and Cyril both reflected in that incredibly sanitized, just like sterile anodyne apartment they live in.
Yeah, it looks like nobody's touched it ever.
Yeah, it looks like a speck of dust would just vaporize upon crossing the threshold.
Have you ever seen Creepshow, the original movie Creepshow?
No.
Okay, well, there's one of the 4 stories. The last story is about a guy who's a germaphobe, and he's a super rich guy who lives in a penthouse, and he basically lives in that exact apartment.
That's funny.
And it's just completely white walls, and the creep showy part of it is that he's afraid of everything: germs, bugs, and people of other races.
Oh boy!
And a bunch of cockroaches get in and basically just like devour him. And that's like the scary part. But anyway, it just reminded me of that guy's apartment. So yes, but what I was going to say about Dedra is that we actually never see her. We see Cyril's mother grieving, but we never actually see her grieve about it other than that one panic attack moment.
Yeah, and we also don't, I mean, I think she accepts that Cyril is most likely dead once she gives the order, but I think it's just the bigger weight of everything just crushing her.
I mean, it's so much, yeah. And then we never get to go see, it would have been kind of interesting to, and maybe we will yet, but like see her back at that apartment with nobody in it.
Yeah.
That would have been interesting, and it might...
I'm sure we'll see more of her at ISB in the remaining 3 episodes of the season.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I'm very curious what we actually are going to see. But when we do return to Coruscant in episode 9...
Yes,
there's
no
time to relax.
What do you think about Bail Organa? Obviously it's recast as Benjamin Bratt, which we mentioned last time. But what do you think of his kind of involvement? Like he's the de facto leader before he even leaves. It's really interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's something that I think he does very well because he has such a prominent role in the wider spectrum of the Rebel Alliance, and I think that what he does is at first you're like, wait, are you a coward? No, you're being noble.
Right. Hard to tell sometimes.
Well, it's like, look, I will stay behind and suffer the consequences for the person who enabled you to speak out against the Emperor. And we do need someone capable and who has influence here on Coruscant, because we can't just cede all ground in the one remaining tool that we have, the Senate, to all of the Emperor's sycophants.
Right.
Not to draw direct parallels to certain things going on right now, but it pays to have people that have a spine that can actually speak to a large body of elected representatives.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I do think it's funny though that like Luthen knows instantly like his people are not to be trusted. Like and he's proven correct, obviously, but like Bail just is like I trust them implicitly.
He knows
I've never met them.
He knows they've been compromised because you learn that Beskha, the ISB plant, is one of Lonnie Young's agents, the compromised ISB agent who reports into Luthen.
Right.
So I was like, okay, that's a nice like little bow to put on that. So Luthen can say like, by the way, or like Lonnie can say, by the way, one of my agents is he's been planted with Bail Organa's private security detail that's going to extract Mon Mothma.
Right.
So that's how like Luthen is like always 4 steps ahead of everyone. And this was a really cool detail when they mentioned that, and I was like, oh, is she actually going to be good? And I'm like, oh no, because Lonnie can't give up the game that he's reporting into Luthen.
No. Yeah, exactly. And the thing about all of these people is that you can't trust them, and the only way that you even know that they're on your same side is that they say, we have friends everywhere. Yes. I have friends everywhere. And I love the fact that, like, Cassian and Mon Mothma is was like, why would I trust anybody of Luthen's? Like, I don't know them.
Yeah.
And yet it's that he kind of like goes, I was on Aldhani. Like,
yes. I know your cousin.
Yeah.
Like, here's my credentials.
Yeah. And
like, I know where you're going.
Yeah.
Like, I know everything that's going on here. Like, I like that he still has to prove himself because she should be suspicious. But what choice does she have in that particular moment?
Which I also really like that her aide, who she's had for years at this point, Erskine is great.
Who they set up in the very first or second episode. You're like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm half Gore on like my mother's side.
Yeah,
it was an interesting detail.
And when she finds out that he is one of Luthen's people, she's so angry because
rightfully so. Yeah. I would be pretty furious if I found out someone was working for an ally but spying on me.
The spy master, like it's just the same as having all
the ISB spying on her. Yeah,
she's got it from both sides, and so that's what makes like her and Cassian finally meeting so, I think, impactful, because like these are effectively two of our main characters, or two of the three main characters. They've only ever met the third. And now they finally all kind of
completing the circuit.
Yeah,
I love their exchange that they have as as Erskine covers their tail after Cassian just takes out Beskha.
Yeah,
such a great save by Erskine to be like, she's a rebel spy.
Yeah,
and everyone's like, what?
Yeah,
but the exchange between Mon and Cassian, where Mon's like, I don't think I can do this, and Cassian's just like, welcome to the rebellion.
Yeah,
she's like, the what?
Yeah.
I love that she doesn't know that it's called the Rebel Alliance or the Rebellion, or maybe she's just like, oh, these are our supporters. I never really thought of them as a rebellion.
Yeah. And we see the kind of pressure, like obviously she supports all of these things and has kind of been working with Luthen a little bit, but like, she has that exchange with Luthen where she's basically like, for this whole 2 years, she's been like denying the very obvious thing that Luthen had her friend Tay killed, and she's just like, what happened to him? And he's just like, I mentioned this before, but I love that line in episode 2 or 3 where he goes, you know the number, and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about, and he's like, how nice for you.
Yeah,
it's because he's just like, this will happen, and he will kill anybody. He does not care as long as he doesn't get found out, his people don't get found out.
Exactly,
all of this stuff.
He's playing the bigger game.
Yeah.
I do have it's a potentially very silly question,
Great,
but I couldn't stop thinking about it, especially when you see the wider shots of when Mon and Castian are trying to escape. What Comic-Con-ass convention center are they at?
I really want to know. Yeah, it's
because of the Senate building. I'm like, this looks very familiar. I know it's not the San Diego Convention Center. I'm pretty sure they filmed this in England.
Yeah.
So it's probably, hey, maybe that's where MCM London's Comic-Con takes place. But it cracked me up because it also reminded me of Star Trek when you realize that Starfleet Academy is just the convention center in Anaheim where WonderCon takes place.
Yeah, that was a bummer watching the first episode of Picard where it's just like, I was just there.
I'm like, and it was not this cool.
No, it was really annoying. It looks like parts of it were filmed at the Barbican Arts Center.
Okay.
And possibly other places too. But yeah, it's definitely a convention center of sorts.
That's just one of those moments where my intrusive thoughts take over, and I'm like, no, they're busy. They just shot Cloris. Let's get back to it.
Well, and that's what I think is really great about this. We talk about the filmmaking is that they did go to real locations. There is something about it, and it's and like the fact that yes, we recognize that's not an alien planet. That's probably just a convention center somewhere. Because we know these things, we go, oh, that's fun. It doesn't make it worse. It actually makes it better because it's real.
It has texture and depth, and it just doesn't feel like... I don't feel like they've really effectively used things like the volume since season 1 of The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
But like, just the amount of content they've had to push through sort of the Disney Plus pipeline just means there's like less time to take on each particular series.
Yeah.
And like, look, this is not denigrating the storytelling, but the filmmaking and like texture and production design in Andor is just night and day compared to, I would say, most other Star Wars shows that they're making, because everything feels like, oh, this feels like an actual place you could be walking around.
100%.
And you don't wind up with a extremely slow speed scooter chase like in the Book of Robert Fettuccine, or also that extremely slow-paced fight in the box yard in Obi-Wan with Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, where it's just like, why are you running so slow? Is because you've already reached the edge of the stage.
Yeah.
It's just... It really yields dividends in the end result for what they did here with Andor.
And you know that they are doing it, I won't say cutting costs, but it's like they don't have to go to a million locations.
No,
they
of
can
course.
just do whatever.
I understand. I understand the efficacy. I just wish there was a way to make it feel a bit more expansive, because I didn't feel that way in The Mandalorian Season 1.
Right.
The Mandalorian Season 1 felt like, oh, wow, they're in some really expansive locations. And then it just felt kind of like more and more claustrophobic.
Yeah.
I think as the timeline sort of gets more and more truncated between like, hey, we need to hit our next like deadline for this because we have shareholders and we need to release this by a certain date.
That's it's in the second season of The Mandalorian. It's the first episode where we see Boba Fett, and it was directed by Robert Rodriguez. That one stands out so much because they just shot it in Griffith Park, I think, or someplace like that. And so it's just like, well, that's weird. It's real. There's real stuff outside.
Yeah, what's going on?
It really like threw me off in the opposite direction, because it's like, why isn't this the volume?
Exactly.
Do you think, and this is obviously we don't know, do you think these exact scripts and these exact actors, if they shot on the volume, do you think that we'd still be talking about the show the way we do? Or does it, the realness, does it play into it? I'm sort of leading you with this question.
Yeah, look, I think the realness amplifies everything. I think the physical elements that they have really amplify the storytelling. But at its core, I still think the story being told and the characters and the performances still stand head and shoulders above a lot of the other Star Wars storytelling we've gotten, because it's not reliant on, you don't have to have seen like every episode of the Clone Wars or Star Wars Rebels. It doesn't feel as self-referential and like nodding and winking in a way as like The Mandalorian has sometimes felt of late. It doesn't feel like they don't really know what story they want to tell, like the Book of Boba Fett, which felt like they had not enough story for too many episodes. And even though 2 of those episodes were just The Mandalorian season 3.5, or whatever it was, 2.5.
Yeah.
It's frustrating, because I get it. Like, you want to celebrate fandom, and I don't mind bringing in other characters. Like, when a character from Rebels comes in, that's cool.
Yeah.
I want it to feel narratively earned. And like, honestly, the biggest groan-worthy moment in the show so far for me was when the hotel worker says to Cassian, "Rebellions are built on hope." And I'm like, yeah, that's the big line that Cassian says in Andor later.
Yeah.
And it's like a nice way to maybe include this character and like be like, oh yeah, you know, I heard this once from a guy that really did me a solid and it really stuck with me. But at the same time, it was just a little, I'm like, okay, like, yeah, you said it. But I think my bigger point is, I think the deeper originality of Andor and the story that they're telling with Andor and the performances we're getting, I find them to be much more resonant than any of the other Star Wars storytelling we're getting, partly because it's different. It's not just following the exploits of the Skywalker family or their like parental guardians, like in Obi-Wan.
Their lineage,
Yes.
It's it feels more robust in a really great way. The fact that we've spent so much time with the Chandrillin people at the wedding, and then of course all the gore and everything like that, and just the different factions on Coruscant. We see more of Coruscant. Like, when you say this planet is one big city in Phantom Menace, you kind of just go, oh, that's okay,
neat.
And then you see like there's a little chase in episode 2 and everything.
Elon Sleazebagano?
Yeah. That's literally his name, everybody. Along with Therm Scissor Punch, and there's another really silly one. I mean, there's a lot of
There's a lot of very silly ones.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. Glupshido.
Yes, of course.
Let's be fair. So,
R.I.P. King. Airlocked.
I think the thing that about this show, and we'll talk about the ending of the episode, but I do want to say, like, I wanted to like Rogue One so much more than I did, and this show is really helping me appreciate Cassian and the kind of the elements of the rebellion that I think were the most interesting parts of Rogue One. But I still like, you know, I've seen people who have watched the whole season go like, and you can just immediately watch Rogue One and it's perfect, and it's like, but it's not, because that movie isn't. It's imperfect. It's like it was. I don't know.
Here's what I think. It sort of this is doing for Rogue One, and even just the very beginnings of A New Hope, what the Clone Wars animated series and Rebels did for the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
Because the prequel trilogy, I think, we saw it when it first came out, and I didn't love those movies. It felt like something was missing. I've come to appreciate them more over time, especially as we get more context filled in, because it's a great idea on paper that I felt was executed a bit sloppily when they came out.
Yeah.
It felt like stuff was missing. And that stuff that was missing, we get all of that rich detail and character work and context through things like the Clone Wars animated series. And that really enhances the story being told. So when you revisit, you're coming to it with like the mental knowledge of like, oh, here's everything that happened to Anakin during this time period. So that really gives me a sense of why he's acting in this particular way. And I think that'll do the same thing for the characters in Rogue One as well.
Yeah. And I do, Saw Gerrera is a character who's popped up here and there, and obviously, like, Forrest Whitaker, when the first trailer for Rogue One came out, we in the office, this was, 7 years ago now, but wait, almost 10 years ago. Holy crap, that came out in 2016. Jeepers creepers.
Good Lord.
But we were making fun of the way he spoke, because it's like,
well, he was doing this, like, wild, and just, if you only have the context of a trailer, his whisper speak is crazy.
But then you realize from this show, he's just been huffing fumes for years to get himself riled up enough to do these crazy missions and stuff.
Yeah, just like this is his like Viking berserker ritual.
Yeah. I love that he's out there in that scene. This is obviously the last arc, but that scene where Willman is fixing the thing, and he's just out there breathing all the fumes, and he's just like, nothing changes for him. That's just how he is.
That's his baseline.
And like he breathes in that thing. Like you get the sense that he's just high all the time, because that's the way you have to. You have to be that kind of jazzed. You have to be on that whatever space.
I'm all hopped up on jet fuel.
Space Molly to be able to do the stuff. Yeah, I think you're right. I think ultimately, like, I am going to go back and, once I finish the season, go back and watch Rogue One.
Well, it has me excited to revisit, because I have not rewatched Rogue One since it came out.
Yeah, I think I watched it once when it was on Blu-ray for the first time. Yeah. But, like, it just was sort of like, I appreciated the filmmaking and I appreciated parts of it, but I think, it does make me kind of wonder, like, what could it have been if Tony Gilroy, because he obviously famously came in to help, like, rewrite stuff after they'd already filmed a bunch. Like, if he had been kind of the writer from the beginning. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he clearly gets what makes these characters tick.
Very much.
He understands what's fascinating and compelling about this time period and their struggle. And, no shade to Gareth Edwards.
Sure.
But I think also having the luxury of being able to tell, when all is said and done, what's it going to be, like 24-ish? Or how many episodes were season 1? 9?
I think
I'm blanking. Being able to tell 20-plus hours of story, effectively. And, like, really luxuriate and spend time with these characters.
No, it was 12 last year.
It was 12 last year?
Yeah, so 24.
Yeah, being able to tell, like, 24 hours of story with these characters, I mean, you obviously get to go deeper than you would in a 2-hour movie.
Yeah. Where Cassian is not the main character.
No. He's still a prominent character.
He's very prominent.
He's not the main character.
Yeah. We have that amazing sequence where he's getting Mon Mothma out. He shoots Cloris Leachman. And, all this stuff. And, when he shoots... what was her name again?
Beskha.
Beskha, thank you very much.
She should have been wearing Beskar.
I know.
She'd still be here.
And Mon just goes, "You killed that woman." She's just so aghast, doesn't understand like the kind of gravity of the situation. They get to the thing, and then they go to the safe house for a while. And I love the fact that it's like we have this incredibly tense escape, and then there's just kind of chill out time where they get to kind of talk to each other, plan the next step, but also kind of just go, he goes and grabs the milk or whatever, and she's just like, "You seem to know your way around here." And he's like, "I lived here for a little bit." And
he's just like, "Oh, huh.
Yeah.
I live in a much nicer place than this.
I'm royalty, effectively. I'm very rich."
Also, just the gut punch and like Cassian's instant acceptance of it when Clyra's like, "Hey, so what? Clea. Oh my God, Clea. When Clea says, "Hey, just so you know, there's a ship waiting. They want her to make a speech. She's going to go in with a Yavin escort, so she can't be seen getting off the ship with you." So thank you.
Yeah.
Your job is done.
Yeah.
We'll take it from here.
Right.
Because they need to project the idea that, like, oh, it's the rebellion that helped her escape.
Yeah. Which technically true.
Yes.
But like, when he goes to Gorman at the end of episode 7, like we have that moment with General Draven where he's just like, you're getting dangerously close to the point where you're not going to be able to just do whatever you want.
Uh-huh.
And you're going to have to fall in line. And that's the moment where he kind of goes, all right, I guess. Because he is the clandestine guy. Like, if they see him too much, like, all this stuff could happen. But also, he doesn't project the most, like, I guess, like, what's the word I'm trying to look for? But the Rebel Alliance is trying to project that they are an actual entity.
No, he doesn't project, like, authority in that way,
yeah.
Because he's meant to blend into the background a little bit and sort of be like, get along with people, but like he's not a hard ass in his just day to day when he's talking to people. No. I mean, he gets a little angry with some folks, but understandably so.
Yeah, that is a gut punch of a moment, man. I really, it's
well, nothing compared to the biggest gut punch, which we spoke a bit about earlier, when Bix gives him some tea to sleep, and while he's conked out, she records, and I love how they framed this, just her staring right down the barrel of the camera.
Yeah.
Recording her farewell to Cassian, just saying, like, I can't be with you. We have to win, we have to beat them, and I believe you have a purpose in making this happen. I need to believe that. So I'm choosing for the both of us, I'm choosing the rebellion.
Yeah.
And it's just so heartbreaking.
And him, like, the cutting between her recording it, him waking up and watching it, and then him running,
trying to find her,
trying to get there before she leaves, not doing it. And then I love the fact that once that's wrapped up, some guys just come over and go, "Hey, we're going to wake this droid up. Do you want to come help?" And he's just like, "Yeah,
I guess. What else can I do?
Yeah,
like something to take my mind off of it, or at least and if it goes south, something I can shoot."
Yeah, precisely.
But I did, for as much as I complained earlier about the, like, rebellions are built on hope little reference, I did get pumped when we finally got K2SO coming online for the very first time. Because I also loved the sound design there when he's turning on. It sounds terrific.
Yeah. And I love the big setup of the engineer being like, okay, look, we did our best. He might work, but if he doesn't work, he's gonna explode. Basically,
it's really all about impulse suppression.
Yeah, and I love that, like, Cassian just grabs a weapon and he's just like,
I don't want safety goggles. Yeah. Just turn this robot on.
Yeah.
Is he gonna be my friend, or do I have to kill him?
It's an incredible line from K2SO where he's just like, "If I've done anything to offend you, I apologize. But if not, could you kindly lower your weapon?"
Yeah, point that somewhere else.
It's so good because that's him. Like, he's just immediately kind of actualized as that character, and I do love the fact that he has that one line, and Alan Tudyk is like third build.
Good for Alan Tudyk. He deserves it. Yeah. I was so happy when I'm like, oh please, please, because he needs a buddy. He needs a win. Poor Will seems like he's irreparably damaged. Bix is gone.
Yeah,
Brasso died at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
So he's losing all these connections to his past, to Ferrix, and all he can do is navigate this uncertain future.
Yeah. And so presumably we will get 3 episodes that will have at least K2SO in it a bit. I'm assuming a good amount, hopefully. I would imagine. Because he is a really great character. And you do need to set up the fact that they are a team, or at least, there's some level of camaraderie.
It opens so many possibilities, too. Like, it was such good instincts on Cassian's part to be like, we can use this droid, I think.
That was really great, And it just kind of proves, like, he's a smart guy. Like, he follows orders, but he also thinks for himself.
Exactly.
The growth, I think, going back and watching, which I am going to do once this is all over, go back and watch the entire thing, like, basically beginning to end, 24 days straight.
Good Lord.
Can such a thing happen?
Apparently.
And just kind of see his growth from this, like, street thug, basically.
Yeah, guy who accidentally kills a rent-a-cop outside a nightclub to leader of the rebellion.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next 3 episodes. I think these two, especially 8 and 9, and especially 8. I think some of the best filmmaking on television I've ever seen. Like, as we record this, the second episode of The Last of Us just came out, And that's amazing televisual filmmaking and genre, and I think this rivals it. I think it's up there.
I think this does for me, and this may be because I'd already played The Last of Us
Sure.
Part 2. This, for me, I think, was a tenser experience and more sort of like edge of my seat storytelling, especially in episode 8, than what we experience in The Last of Us season 2, episode 2.
Yeah.
Spectacular episode. I loved
wonderful.
it.
Really great.
But
wonderful. What a weird way to say that.
Yeah, it's just love what happens.
Everyone, including my wife, thought it was great. And will continue to watch the show.
Very happy with everything that happened. No, I think it's a good time to be a fan of genre television. We're eating very well.
Yeah.
And I think these 2 episodes in particular, I mean, honestly, 7, 8, 9.
7 is important, but like...
This batch of episodes, I think, has been one of the best sort of like storylines on television all year. And I hope it's met and exceeded, because that just means great things for the remainder of our TV watching year.
Yeah. And truly, like... hats off to everybody involved, but like Janusz Metz is just like an absolute star directing these episodes, and Dan Gilroy did a hell of a job doing basically completely disparate stories. Like the episode 8 story is not unrelated, but so completely self-contained, and then the episode 9 story is its own thing, and he does such a great job all the way through. And man, I can't say enough good things about these, and the performances. Like, you know, we've sung Genevieve O'Reilly's
She's
praises.
so good.
She's incredible. I love the fact that somebody who was cast as Mon Mothma in a deleted scene from episode 3 got to come back in Rogue One and then be basically one of the 3 lead characters
and then
of this TV
flex
show.
This hard. Like everyone on this like deserves to be cast in a million other things, because they're all performing so well.
Truly. And you know, Diego Luna, let's not like beat around the bush. Like, he is a perfect central figure for this.
Yes.
I think, you know, and these episodes don't have a ton of Stellan Skarsgård. He's obviously incredible, but like, I think Diego Luna maybe gets overshadowed by some of these other bigger performances a lot. And I don't think he should. I think he's playing, I think he's underplaying it just the right amount, because Cassian is a kind of repressed type of character.
I mean, I don't necessarily think he is overshadowed. I just think that they are spending more time with a greater variety of characters.
Yeah.
Because we need to see how all of these storylines are progressing. And like we still see how each of these periods are affecting him, and like the changes he goes through. And, you know, he really can just communicate in multitudes through in some cases, just like a glance. And I think it's very, very impressive. Like, you know, the actor who plays Cyril, with the actor who
Kyle
plays
Soler,
Dedra Miro's actress as well. Just like a phenomenal ensemble.
Yeah,
so.
Truly great. I'm loving this season. I think it's the best stuff going right now, man. I think it's so good.
It's good to feel this excited for new Star Wars each week, in a way that, you know, I get to. I'm very privileged
Very
to
much so.
watch and talk about this stuff for a living.
Yeah.
But this show, more so than many of the others in recent years, is one that just gets me super stoked each and every week, even when it is something that is abjectly horrifying.
Yeah. And that's really the mark of this show's kind of like, it's about the kind of tragedies and the successes.
Yeah.
You know, for every time the rebels get a little win, there's a huge loss. And I think that's just a really important part of the story of the rebellion, which the show kind of gives us. Yeah. It's really great. Dan, thank you so much for joining me, as always.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. How can people find you and your work on the internet?
Well, you can find me pretty much each and every week right here on Nerdist.com, in pretty much any form you can conceive of and beyond. You can also check out the Quest and Answers podcast on Geek and Sundry, or you can find me online at Dan Casey or at Osteoferocious, depending on the platform.
Wonderful. You can find me as well here on Nerdist.com. Every week I do this podcast called Laser Focus, which I think I would love people to listen to more of. We have a bunch of back episodes. We're approaching episode 100.
Wow.
So if you want to go back and listen to some other stuff, we've done some deep dives into this. Obviously, I'm plugging this show on this show, but we're on a new platform right now, so let's try it out. Lots of stuff in the past in audio form. And you can also follow me on Letterboxd, because that's basically the only place I post nowadays. Kyle_Anderson to see all the weird shit I watch.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Once again, thank you, Dan. Thank you all for listening and indeed watching Laser Focus. I've been your host, Kyle Anderson. Join me again next week when my guest will be a different person. Bye-bye. Laser Focus is a production of Nerdist Industries and Legendary Digital Networks. It was edited by Adam Murray and hosted by me, Kyle Anderson. For more, visit Nerdist.com.